Hi everyone, good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you. He was set up. Promised to be easy and profitable, but in reality, damn it, how stupid he'd been to fall for it in the first place. A blizzard was raging outside the window, pounding on the walls and windows like a vicious beast, but the room was warm. The radiators were working, and the fireplace was alive with flames. The deceptively peaceful crackling of wood was accompanied by the sounds of scraping metal and a woman's crying. Please, I beg you, you must believe me. I don't know how to open it. The owner of the house, a slender blonde in her early 30s, sat huddled in the corner of the sofa. She was shivering violently, her face smeared with mascara and a hot bruise on her cheekbone. Oliver shrugged. He hadn't meant for it to turn out this way. He wouldn't be here at all if he'd known there were people in the house. But he'd been set up, taken advantage of by the stupidity of a teenager, of course. It was so easy. The boy swore foully under his breath and nearly roared with a frenzied cocktail of self-disgust, confusion because he had no idea what was going to happen next, and fear because it wasn't at all what he'd imagined. And when Cian called him to a sure thing, after which he could close all his debts and still have a fat piece left, he agreed, easily agreed, not thinking that it would turn out this way. Will you stop it? Come on. It's useless, Oliver approached his partner in the black business. Shut up, threw Cian. Judging by the anger that skewed his face as he turned around, the word could have been addressed to both Oliver and the young woman. Or maybe to both of them. Cian was squatting, kneeling, hunching over in front of the safe buried in the wall. That's where the money was supposed to be. Where else would it be kept in a house like this? In general, Cian said that here they would be able to get expensive electronics. Probably gold, but the main thing, of course, modern millionaires should keep in safes. They found it quickly. Just as the gunner had said, it was hidden behind a wall panel, an ornate plate of dark wood with curlicues, which Cian crumbled into splinters with special pleasure. However, he had a hand in other things in the house as soon as they immobilized the owners, knocked over a couple of fragile tables. And they're only doing it on the first floor. Rising from the floor, Cian kicked the safe with his foot. After the code that Blondie said did not fit, he freaked out and tried to open it banally, stupidly by force. But naturally, only the iron scratched the safe did not give in a millimeter. Cian turned around and quickly walked to the part of the living room where the captives were. Okay, the jokes are over. You think I'm an idiot? Cian was almost 2 meters tall and impressive in appearance, with a shaved head, a thick black beard, and deep-set eyes that looked at the world in a contemptuous and unkind way. The thought flashed through Oliver's mind that if such a man were to loom over him like that, grabbed him by the throat with his fist, he would tell him exactly what the real password to the safe was, even if it contained all the gold in the world. Please. The blonde couldn't resist. Her thin wrists, as well as her ankles, were bound with rope. No, I'm nothing. I don't have the password. And now Oliver realized everything Cian knew. It was worth a guess that he knew the owners would be home when he saw the rope in the trunk among the other. Thieves' equipment. It was just easier to convince him, Oliver, to do the job, because he was afraid. So Cian decided to bait him with ease and then drag him into the mud. Bastard! Cian swung at his captive, causing her to shriek and squirm. But then he stopped suddenly. His mouth stretched into a nasty grin, revealing the lack of several front teeth. Oliver wouldn't have dared say that in public, but he suspected that Cian didn't go to the dentist because he risked losing his teeth every day. His hot temper and hatred of everything around him were not conducive to peaceful resolution of conflicts, which Cian usually provoked himself. Why are we all here with you? Hey, let's ask the master again." With these words, Cian stepped towards the man. It was a tall, most intelligent-looking blonde man. Cian had twisted him as soon as they entered the house through the front door with the help of lockpicks. Twisted and tied to a chair, asked about the code of the safe, hit him a couple of times, and then, muttering that his wife ordered the installation of the safe so she knows the password, just gagged the man. But now the rag had been removed from his mouth. Cian grabbed the blonde man by the collar of his shirt. "So, man, how we gonna solve this thing? You want to tell me the code, or do you want help?" "Look," he was having a hard time with the words. "You're wrong. I don't know." "What are you gonna do, huh?" yelled Cian so that saliva flew out of his mouth, as if a fighting dog was barking, splashing foam. "Well, nothing." "What? You think you're the smartest? Or maybe you think that I will beat you further and you, such a tough man, will bear it. No way." He let him go so hard that the chair nearly toppled over. "Oliver, come here. It's time for you to get in on the action." He grinned again. "What? Cian, why don't we?" "Just get the equipment, the gold." The young man moved closer. "Listen here," ignored his suggestion by the one who obviously knew all about breaking the law. "Now here's what we're gonna do. Strip the broad." "What?" Oliver's eyes widened. What the hell are you talking about?" "I think he's gonna start talking when he sees us having fun with her." "No. No. Please, no." The girl looked at him pleadingly, twisted her head around, and finally her eyes, so impossibly blue, just locked onto Oliver's. "You're not like this. You're not like this. You're not evil. Please, I don't know the code. And just touch it," the blonde suddenly said very quietly, but so menacingly that both robbers froze. "Just touch it. She belongs to me. Do you hear me? No one dares to touch her." "Look at him go." Cian licked his lips. "It's gonna happen." "Archie, please." The young woman held out her bound hands to her husband. "Archie, my love. Calm down. Everything will be all right. You hear me? It's gonna be all right." "I won't do it," Oliver protested. "That was never the deal." "What am I? Some kind of scumbag? We're here to rob, not if you touch her." The blonde couldn't finish before Cian, freaking out at the kid, decided to take out his anger on the prisoner and punched him in the face. Yes, so that the chair still toppled to the floor, knocking down the coffee table, on which the blonde fell headlong. His spouse screamed shrilly. Oliver felt nauseous. And Cian, as if everything was going according to plan, returned the chair to its upright position and began to whip the man on the cheeks, bringing him to his senses. "Archie, Archie," the young woman whispered. Oliver stared at the back of Cian's head, shiny with sweat, as if it had been rubbed with oil, with greasy folds gathering underneath. "I wonder," he thought, what if he knocked him out now, knocking him to the ground, then untie the owners of the house, and just walk away? It seemed to Oliver that there was nothing else in the world he needed to be happy, except he knew that if he did, he'd probably be arrested within 24 hours. And why, by the way, didn't they wear any masks when they broke into the house? Why? It's elementary. All the bad guys in action movies don't forget that. Unless a new thought slid coldly down his spine, as if he'd come into contact with a snake that promised to sting. What if Cian didn't want to leave any witnesses to his crime? Oliver felt even more nauseous. The hamburger he'd grabbed at the diner for his last $50 was begging to be eaten. "Hey, kid." Cian grinned and nodded at the girl, who seemed to have fallen into a stupor, frozen, staring at her husband with widened eyes and only her lips moving soundlessly. The blonde, meanwhile, was coming to his senses. With a groan, he opened his eyes, spit pink saliva, and looked around as if he did not understand how he was here and what was going on. Then he shrugged his shoulders, as if testing his bonds for strength. And finally, very carefully, he stared at the scene playing out in front of him. "Come on!" Scene shouted and grabbed Oliver's arm, yanking him down so that he almost fell onto the couch. Oliver's palm slid down to the woman's shoulder and below. The arm burned. The wife of the master of the house, even now mournful and frightened, was beautiful. Her figure would have been the envy of a model. The skin under the silk of her blouse seemed so soft. "I'll knock you down myself," Cian growled. "Get everything off her." Oliver nodded. One part of his mind was screaming that what was happening was a nightmare, and the other part was afraid to disobey, and Oliver was disgusted with himself. But his heart beat faster at the touch, the closeness of the woman's body, and the blood rushed to his cheeks. Cian was partly right. In his 18 years, the guy had not had close contact with the opposite sex, and it seemed to Oliver that this was the worst and most shameful secret of all. His fingers, naughty as they were, grasped the edge of the cardigan he'd thrown over his blouse and pulled it down. Get away from her. Actually, it was natural that her husband didn't keep quiet. Except those words were spoken in a strange tone. It was lower and deeper than the way the master had spoken before. But the main strange thing was that it sounded frighteningly calm. "Get away from her and get out of the house," the blonde man continued. "What did you say?" Even Cian seemed surprised. He let go of the girl, pushed her onto the couch, and strode over to his captive. "Don't you get it? I'll be right back." "So you don't want to do it nicely," nodded the blonde and smiled. "So you'll be prey. That's even better. I've been." He smiled even wider. Oliver swallowed hard. For some reason, he remembered the scary movies where all sorts of creatures from the other side of the world could smile wider than a human face could. He wasn't hunting. "Psycho," Cian muttered, but somehow not as confidently as before. "I'll give you." He didn't have time to finish. He also made a big mistake, which he didn't realize was possible, and leaned low, facing his opponent. A moment later, the blonde hit him in the nose with his forehead. The big man yelped and clutched his face. Oliver watched with his mouth hanging open. He'd only seen this kind of thing in action movies. Maybe. The blonde took his hands from behind his back, jumped up from his chair, slammed the edge of his palm into Cian's neck, and before he could regain his senses, brought his knee up and smacked him between the legs. Oliver staggered backward. His sidekick howled thinly and collapsed. Oliver shifted his gaze from his squirming mentor in crime to the one who seemed to have been easy prey from the start. The blonde stood breathing deeply. Their gazes met. Now, Oliver rushed to the young woman and hurriedly began to untie the ropes on her legs. "Look, I didn't mean to. I didn't know anyone was going to be in the house." The boy realized that he was probably doing something wrong. But he also felt that if he could clearly demonstrate right now that he didn't want to hurt anyone else, then how it would help him. "Archie," the blonde man's wife said quietly. "Archie, please, no, don't." "Not again, Archie. Darling, can you hear me? Please, you have to hear me. I love you." Oliver, having finished with the rope on his legs, began to untangle the rope on his arms. He glanced at the man. "Why is he standing there? Why is he standing there? Why is he staring at me with glass eyes? Why doesn't he try to disarm Cian, who's already trying to get up, but it seems he's in a bad way?" "Did you like it?" the blonde asked, and Oliver didn't immediately realize that he was talking to his wife. "You liked it, didn't you?" "Archie, please." "I didn't." She smiled and held out her still-bound hands to him. The knot was tight. Oliver couldn't untangle it yet. Archie calmed down. "You need to..." "Archie." It was like he could taste the name. Oliver was just a bystander. He didn't know these people. He didn't know the relationship between the couple, except that it seemed to him that the man he'd met for the first time had looked at his wife very differently from the way he was looking at her now. That was the kind of look that could be chained. That was what it seemed to Oliver. "No, not that," Captive whispered and sobbed. "You liked it," the blonde sighed. "You didn't resist well." He kicked Sean, who seemed to be trying to get up. Oliver was about to rush to the front door. And let it be what it would be. It's already done. But then the blonde moved sharply to the wall, on which hung a digital alarm control panel. He entered something on it, and there was a low rumble that seemed to come from the very depths of the house. Then suddenly, the lights went out abruptly. "Archie, no!" The young woman cried out and cried. Oliver whirled his head around in horror. The blinds were quickly and rattlingly pulled down over the windows, where the scant street light was streaming into the room as the blizzard raged around the yard lights. "Oliver!" Sean groaned heavily on the floor. The guy moved forward by feel, stretched out his arm, and his partner in the terrible adventure grasped it. It's heavy, almost dragged him down, but there, up he went. How? Sean swore foully. "Psycho, that's it, he's finished. But first, oh, you've decided to stay late as a guest." The mocking voice of the owner of the house came from somewhere above, and the next moment he revealed himself. Oliver had no idea how one could move so easily in total darkness, but now the man was standing at the top of the stairs leading to the second floor of the house. He could not be seen well, but he could see the company below perfectly, because he was pointing a flashlight at them. It wasn't just the flashlight that sent a shock through Oliver's back. In the man's hands was some big thing. The consciousness suggested its name was a crossbow. Then the consciousness began to humor that this is what happens to bad boys. If they decide to steal someone else's house, the owners may have a crossbow. Oliver also thought that it was eerily strange. What modern man would ever need such a thing? He could not, of course, read Sean's thoughts, but he was also dumbfounded by the sight. "What are you, man?" He put his hands palms up. "Come on. We didn't touch your grandmother." "You touched what belongs to me," he said calmly, and then pulled the trigger. The crossbow bolt sliced through the air just above Sean's shoulder and slammed into the wall, knocking splinters out of it. "Next time you'll be the target," the blonde said in his most carefree tone. And again something flew down into the company, but now it was a flashlight. "And this is to keep you from getting bored." It jumped down the steps, tearing through the darkness, and stopped at Oliver's feet. He picked it up hastily and immediately shone it upward. The man was no longer there. "Let's go," shouted Sean, who had somehow long ago realized the imaginary consequences of the fact that the target of the crossbow in the hands of this crazy intellectual could be himself. Oliver was in complete agreement with this decision. The men rushed in terror to the door a few meters separated from the porch to the auto, and then away. The door swung open. A pellet of snow slammed into their faces. The doorway was closed with a grate. "What the hell?" "Help me," Sean shouted, shaking his hands at the steel structure, but it only jingled softly and wouldn't budge. "The alarm," Oliver exhaled. He activated the alarm. The windows were closed too. The shutters looked like they're made of metal and they're locked. We're trapped. Sean gave him a puzzled look. "What alarm system, you idiot?" "We disabled it." "The second alarm." A female voice sounded behind them. The raiders turned toward her. Sean grabbed Oliver's flashlight and shined it in the girl's face. She squinted. "What second alarm? What the hell is going on in here? How do I open it?" "I didn't set it. It's him." "No, I'm not staying here." Sean was loud. He was tough. But Oliver knew him and he knew he was scared. "Tell me how to get out of here." "I don't know." "Could you lower the lights, please? Thank you." She came closer and held out her bound hands. "What the hell is going on in here?" Sean shook the bars again. "That's it! He's dead! Hey, you psycho!" he shouted into the dark space, like depths of the house. "If you want to get out, you'd better let me loose." What's going on? Oliver asked, taking hold of the rope ties around his wrists. He couldn't see, but he knew the skin beneath him was chafed, and though the timing wasn't right, it seemed so wrong. His fingers lingered on the thin, delicate skin beneath which he could feel the vein of a pulse, just a little, longer than the process of release required. We have to go, he might. Come back. There's another way out of the house. But we must hurry. Please, the young woman looked at Sean and Oliver carefully. You have to believe me. My husband, he's sick, and he could come back, but And I can help you. If you help me, stop. Sean caught her by the shoulder and pulled her toward him. Why should we believe you? Maybe you're taking us to this psycho. If I lead you to him, she replied quietly, he won't like it. He's not planning on it. And then he'll decide to punish me. All right, let's go. The kitchen is the way through. Give me the flashlight. You're shining it wherever you can, but I need it under my feet and a little forward. Sean swore again, but he did what she said. Through the living room, into a narrow, long hallway, past another room, perhaps another living room, and into the kitchen. In terms of floor space, it could have been a studio in some new-built high-rise in a residential neighborhood. The trembling beam of the flashlight revealed a marble table, island in the center of the room, rows of pans and pots hanging above it, a refrigerator and a stove. Down! The girl reacted instantly, faster than they heard the approaching footsteps. She pulled Sean down, and Oliver pulled himself to the floor, and all three of them took cover behind the table. Island. The footsteps froze at the entrance to the kitchen. The door creaked open. A red beam slid over the heads of the unwilling comrades, in arms as they fled from the strange, intimidating master of the house. Oliver covered his mouth with the palm of his hand. Is that a telescopic sight? Is he out of his mind? The guy felt that they were in a mousetrap. Yes, Sean was strong and could take down anyone in hand-to-hand combat, but here, he missed the moment and he was taken down. And now the homeowner has the advantage, and somehow it seemed that using his wife as a hostage to make some demands was not an option at all, because he threw her with him and did not try to save her. She's afraid of him, and it seemed that there wasn't a single lie in it. Footsteps were heard again, now moving away. Where are we going? Oliver asked. Wait, Sean, wiping his nose, which now he couldn't breathe at all. So he caught the air with his mouth, stopped the boy, and hissed to the girl. Get her to explain what's even going on here. Why did your husband take off and leave you behind? You said he was sick, Oliver remembered. What's he sick with? My husband has become a different person. And it's your fault. What? Sean was clearly on edge. Despite the danger they were in, he was ready to snap. The doctor said he shouldn't be under any kind of stress. And you hit him. He hit his head. You. The girl may have bitten her finger. We're all gonna die here. Stupid. Sean spit. I've had enough of you. Fuck me. He picked up the flashlight. Sean, Oliver called out to him. We have to stick together. Yeah, he grinned. It's like a cheap horror movie, isn't it? We can't split up. Except this is life, not a movie. And I'm out to here. And if I meet your psycho, you'll be a widow. He slipped out of the kitchen with those words. Not that way. I stopped Oliver from following him. We need to go to the second floor. There. Maybe they missed something when they installed the alarm system. Then we can leave. I'm going after Sean. Leave it, the girl grabbed Oliver's hand. Her fingers were hard and hot to the touch. You're not like him. You didn't mean for it to happen this way, did you? And if I said yes, would you believe me? My name is Catherine, and I believe you. Sometimes people do things they regret. He thought he could have sworn she was talking about herself. And Oliver also thought that maybe Sean leaving was for the best. It was a terrible truth, but maybe now they had a better chance. Maybe Sean will be a distraction. I'm Oliver. You can just call me Oliver. He's confused. So what's your husband's illness? Dissociative identity disorder, she replied, and then clarified, realizing he didn't understand. Split personality. My Archie is a very good man. Kind, intelligent, generous. I had hoped it was over, that he was cured. But the red button to activate the emergency systems. And now, and who was he now? Oliver sensed he definitely wasn't going to like the answer. Someone who doesn't want to let you go alive, Catherine answered in a mundane way. As if she were talking about, for example, the fact that her husband worked as a senior manager with $1 million salary. I need to get out, said Oliver. My mother is sick, and my sister is small. You wanted to steal to cure her? The boy didn't know what to say. He regretted that he'd said anything personal. What a wooden idiot. She is their victim. Why should she care about his motives, his life? Meanwhile, Catherine pulled him along with her. We had to move literally by feel. Follow me. I'll tell you where the obstacles are. Well, or at least fall first. Although, wait. Somewhere there must be candles. I'll be right there. There was a rustle of drawers and their contents, and then a small candle in a candle holder lit up in the young woman's hand. The scent of cinnamon and, I think, apples wafted around. Oliver sneezed and rubbed his nose with the sleeve of his sweater. From the kitchen they came to the glass, in veranda, and then the bars were down over the glass. But from here they could see the world around them. Snowstorm began to subside. The boy could see their car parked in the distance. He had the keys in his jeans pocket, so the only thing left to do was to get out. Passing the veranda, they entered the house again and found themselves at the winding staircase leading upstairs. Come on, follow me. The ex-captive hurried, and Oliver moved forward by feel. Phone. He stopped halfway up. Sean still had his cell phone. We can call for help. You're a brave man to give up like that. It's better than with your husband here, the boy muttered. But I'm afraid he's activated his cell phone jammers. What kind of day is this? Oliver felt like he was going to cry like a little boy. Why is there even a second alarm? And one with silencers. I think he said it when he had his last attack. He likes to isolate the places he lives, she muttered thoughtfully. If you don't make him angry, then my Archie is very good. Only sometimes he does strange things. How did you ever marry him? She turned sharply. One day I'll tell you. If we get out of here, okay? Oliver nodded and slowly they moved on. Now they found themselves on the second floor in a hallway. Footsteps sounded suddenly heavy, rumbling. Sean jumped out from around the corner. All the doors are closed and the windows. I think he's right behind me. The man turned around nervously with a hysterical, skewed face. The flashlight in his hand was visibly shaking. The cell phone doesn't work. He jumped up on the spot, turned back to the pair of fugitives. What in the world? The blond man appeared behind Sean's back. He came out from around a corner, a bend in the corridor, of course, but it seemed as if he had just appeared out of thin air as a vengeful ghost. The next moment, Catherine shrieked and literally threw herself at Oliver, knocking him to the floor, a crossbow bolt whizzing over their heads again. Oliver's shoulder hurt. The candle fell and went out. Sean screamed, dropped the flashlight, and now it was almost impossible to see anything at all. But judging by the sounds, the two men were clashing. There was heavy breathing, stifled swearing, and then, with a distinctive wood crunch, the railing enclosing the second floor landing at the staircase broke, and Sean fell down. Run! Catherine jumped up and Oliver rose as well. Precious seconds were enough time to get around the blond man who was busy contemplating the man who had fallen down. Oliver didn't understand how his companion had managed to pick up a flashlight, but it helped a lot. They passed a long, narrow corridor that turned several more times and never stumbled, and then they came to a dead end. "Help!" she ordered, pointing to a hatch in the ceiling. The kid didn't understand anything, but reached up, jumped up and grabbed the ring, pulled down the hatch open, throwing out the ladder. It hit Oliver the attic, but it's like a trap. He hesitated. Catherine was already upstairs. "Give me your hand." "Why?" "Quickly. Behind you." Oliver turned around. Yes, that was it. The blond man was coming around the corner, and from the sounds of it, he was reloading his crossbow. The kid went up, collapsed on the attic floor. Catherine raised the ladder and slammed the hatch. "Help!" The next moment, they were already moving some old chest of drawers over the hatch. Oliver was trembling. Tears were streaming down the boy's face. He had never wanted to live so badly. Just to live, not to end his days at the hand of this psychopath. "Get in here now," the young woman continued to command. She opened a small window and leaned out through the waist-high window. There was no bars. Yes, they missed the attic window when installing the alarm system. Bingo. Catherine was clearly on edge. Oliver walked over and looked out, and there was a roof with a solid slope. "Come with me," she was on her way out. The window was barely big enough for a person. "What?" "No. Where are you going? Are you crazy? If you go around the roof, it's 3 levels above the veranda." "That's the architect's idea." Catherine closed her eyes in concentrated thought. "Yes, you can jump down there, from the 2nd floor." Shocked, Oliver asked. He also heard something hit the hatch from below. "It's not high up there." "The snow is not cleared below." "We didn't have time to clear it." "Oliver," she said his name for the first time, and that, strangely enough, gave the boy strength. "This is the only chance." He hesitated for a moment. He just felt himself. There's a floor beneath his feet and a crazy husband with some kind of personality disorder. Outside the house, it's winter and a car to get out of here in. Oliver caught her arm. "Wait, I'll go first." He tried not to look down. It wasn't slippery underfoot, but he ducked, balancing. He put his arm around his companion gently, helping her out of the window, and pulled her tighter to him when he looked down. "Hell's Heights. It's going to be okay," Catherine said reassuringly and bared her teeth from the cold. Oliver hurriedly pulled off his jacket and threw it over her shoulders. Where to next? Every moment spent on the roof felt like an eternity. But at the same time, incredibly soon they were on the roof of the veranda. Oliver was lucky not to twist his legs while jumping down, and Oliver was the first to go down, supporting his companion. But the ground was very high. Too high. Oliver vividly imagined how, when he jumped, his body would penetrate the snowdrift to the bottom, and he would be left lying there, helpless, freezing. And yet he jumped. He grouped himself and jumped, covering his head. The pain burned both legs, and the air was knocked out of his chest, but the snowdrift turned out to be only half fluffy and airy, and below the snow had piled up. Ekaterina came down second, and she did it more skillfully, but judging by the way she hurt her leg too. "Come on, a little bit left," encouraged her Oliver, and supporting her under the arm. They ran together to the car. The boy didn't look back. The keys were in place, and they breathed a sigh of relief when they were in the car. "Phone!" exclaimed the girl, seeing on the dashboard a simple model. Not a smartphone, but an ordinary phone that Oliver had left in the car when they went on the case. The girl dialed the number. Oliver expected her to call for help, but she suddenly spoke in English. The guy rounded his eyes. What the hell is going on? Oliver didn't understand any of the words. Well, almost, except for the name Archie, the name Charles, and the word doctor. "Who were you calling?" he asked. "My husband's psychiatrist." Catherine fidgeted in the seat, wrapping herself tighter in the jacket she'd given him. He's going to pick him up." Oliver nodded. though he still didn't understand. His fingers clenched the car keys. He was reminded of scenes from thrillers, usually when they thought they were safe, like getting to the car. But there was a white silence around him. The stout figure of a psycho with a crossbow did not appear from the house. There was nothing. Oliver covered his eyes. He just knew these were very precious moments. We still need to call. Well, whoever we need to call. Cian's in there. And I want to give up. I want to give up. Cian's gonna turn me in anyway. I'll get you a lawyer, Catherine said. It sounded easy, simple and mundane, as if they were old acquaintances in the first place, rather than a criminal and a recent victim. Oliver rounded his eyes. Shut up, please, the girl continued. That's what I've decided, and that's what will happen. You're not a completely lost boy. You can still live differently. And now, we'd better stay where we are. Since he hasn't come out, my husband, perhaps he's getting better, she suggested thoughtfully. I'm sorry. What happened to your friend? Archie mustn't touch him again. Well, if he, your friend, survived the fall, Archie's probably looking for me all over the house. He could be into this for a very long time. Cian's not my friend, Oliver replied, and then he just cried. Crying like a little boy. Oliver was born into a broken home. His father had abandoned his mother when he'd first learned she was expecting a child. There were no grandparents, and in general, any kind of kin who could support the case and warmth of soul. His mother was an orphanage. She lived in the apartment provided to her. She had neither higher nor specialized secondary education and worked whatever she had to. Several times throughout Oliver's childhood, she tried to get together with men. She told her son that he needed a father, that he needed a man in the house. The boy resisted this. He didn't like that his mother's chosen ones were rude to him, bringing him up not only with shouts, but also with a heavy hand. He even thought of running away from home several times. But then, when Oliver was 12 years old, his mother gave birth to his little sister Angela. Angela's father, missing just like Oliver's father was. It was only because of this little girl that the boy changed his mind about running away from home. He loved her with all his heart. As soon as he saw her, as soon as he took the squeaky little bundle in a plaid blanket in his arms, suddenly he realized that this was the real and most important treasure. This is the person who is now dearer to him than anyone else in the world, and even closer than his mother. Oliver hoped that for Angela's sake his mother would come to her senses, quit drinking, get a steady job. In general, they would live well, and no strange men would be needed in the house. But it did not happen. Mother continued to drink. She blamed both her children for the failure of her life. In the house continued to visit dubious persons. At 13, Oliver began to work. He decided that he would finish all 11 grades of school, although at first thought to quit after the 9th. But now there was a sense of learning. And then suddenly, how everything became sharply worse. My mother went blind. Her body was destroyed by alcohol. Sis grew up a weak, sickly child. Quiet and meek, he was not capricious, did not ask for toys or treats. But Oliver was constantly tormented by the fact that he could not give her anything. At least he could feed her enough. Neighbors did not despised his family because of his mother, and all this reflected on their children. At 15, Oliver started learning how to fix cars. And then one day he was called to fix the car by one neighbor, whom he was terribly afraid of seeing. Neighbors were judging that he was an ex-con, that he was just a monster. But Cian suddenly took Oliver, as they call it, under his wing. A couple of times helped out with money and did not require a quick repayment of the debt. Listened to the boy's complaints about life. And then one day, When Oliver complained that he is already an adult, all the roads in life are open, but does not know how to settle in life are open, but does not know how to settle in life. Exams in the university failed. At work pay pennies and need to raise his sister. That's when Sina made him an offer which was impossible to refuse. He said there's this country house he's been looking at. It's in the middle of nowhere. Some rich people have rented it, but they're not in the house right now. Everyone just went in, took away everything, the password to the safe. Then Sina assured that he was a master at it. And that's it. Oliver will be able to enter the university for a fee. Will be able to enter the university for a fee. Will be able to help his mother and sister. Oliver listened and believed every word, and the doubts that arose simply extinguished, suppressed. Because he really wanted to solve his problems easily and simply, Oliver consoled himself with the fact that the rich people, well, their property would suffer, but they might have gotten their money in an honest way, because today there are millionaires like that. And he agreed. And that's how it turned out in the end. Until the cars with lights flashed at the entrance to the mansion, Oliver and Catherine no longer spoke to each other. They just sat in silence. Oliver was shocked that Catherine had actually hired him a lawyer. She didn't leave him a lawyer. She didn't leave him, and they saw each other quite often for the next few months until, while so much was happening, the lawyer turned out to be a master of his craft. Oliver roared like a little boy again when it became clear that he was getting probation. After all, it meant that he did not lose the main thing, that he would be near his mother and little sister. His mother, by the way, was very angry with her son, scolding and chasing him with a wet towel, and then hugging him and crying, saying that he was poor and would surely end up badly. Angela understood a little of what was happening and just clung to her brother, following him with her tale. Oliver experienced nothing when he learned that Cian had survived. He'd suffered a very serious back injury, and now he's gone far and long for everything. But the most strange to Oliver seemed that Catherine told him about her husband. It turned out that the same doctor, Charles psychiatrist naturally, with the support of competent lawyers, took Archie with him for hospitalization in a private clinic in England. It turned out that Catherine's husband had British citizenship, and now, according to her, his attending physician had gotten his patient back at his full disposal. At first, Oliver learned about all this in general terms, and then in detail. Just one day, when he was already out, Catherine called him to meet. They met in a small and cozy cafe. Oliver didn't go to such places. But Catherine tactfully and firmly, at the same time, told him not to worry about the bill she was treating him to. She thanked him again. "Don't," the guy looked away. "What am I to be thanked for? It's not like that." Catherine made a sign to him to shut up, putting her index finger to her lips. "You didn't leave me, you helped me leave, and I believe you wouldn't have gone all the way in what you were pushed to do." The waitress came over and lowered their order of 2 coffees and dainty pastries in front of them. "Thank you," Oliver said. It wasn't about what he was being treated to now, though that, of course, was appreciated by the guy who wasn't accustomed to refinement. He was thanking her for helping him stay with his sister, and for handing him the envelope afterward when he got home. It felt to Oliver like coals hot in his hands, because the envelope contained money, a decent amount of money for him. Oliver was determined then that he would pay it back. Enough. He had accepted the help. That was clear. There were indeed reasons not to reject it, but now this was too much. He dialed Catherine's number to ask where he could give her the money back. "It's not for you," she answered, and he could have sworn she was smiling at that moment. "It's for your sister, and Mom's sick, right? So they need help. So keep it. Get smart. Think about how you're going to study more." Now they met in person, face to face, for the first time since that conversation. "Remember how I said I'd tell you everything one day?" Oliver sipped his coffee and nodded. "If you want to," he said carefully. "I do," Catherine replied firmly, and she spoke. She told that then, 15 years ago, she came to the big city full of hope. Her family remained in a small village, and she hoped to study, get a good job, then take a mortgage apartment, build a career, move relatives to the city. In general, the plans were fabulous. Ekaterina entered the university. She wanted to work in the field of tourism. She has always been attracted to distant countries. She dreamed that one day she herself will go on a trip around the world. It seemed to her, it is a wonderful profession to help people organize their dream trips. At the same time, the girl worked part-time as a translator from Spanish and Italian languages. She was also good at English. For the ability to languages, Catherine thanked her grandfather. He was a school teacher and her main mentor in childhood. Catherine got a job in a travel agency in one day just because of the unique knowledge of foreign languages. She had a unique chance. She was entrusted to work with an individual tour for one wealthy man. It turned out to be Archie. It was love at first sight. However, only from her side. She was enchanted by this young, rich, handsome man, who, it turns out, generally came from abroad recently there. He had a father who lived there, which he lost a few years ago, and here, the guy briefly returned to the country where his mother came from, which he lost at an early age. Catherine created a unique tour for Archie to admire the nature and get acquainted with cultural monuments. And then he began to give her signs of attention. Catherine was over the moon. It seemed to her that it was unreal because he asked her to marry him. Naturally, now she had the opportunity to help her family. True, Archie said that they would have to go abroad for a long time. He had a business there, left as an inheritance by his father. 8 years later, they had a daughter, Marianne. I thought I was Cinderella who got his prince. Catherine smiled, but the smile came out sad, and even more sadness reflected in her eyes. And then I learned his secret just one day. Archie changed. We were at a reception, and one of the men asked me to dance. He'd had a little too much to drink. I made my husband jealous. I even wanted him to be jealous, because the night before we'd had a fight, which I don't remember. We came home after the reception, and it was like Archie was a different person. Oh, please, she lifted her head, looking at the ceiling for a minute, as if it would help her focus. Just tell me when you've had enough of listening to this madness. I want you to go on, Oliver said with sudden determination. It seemed to him that it was very, very important to hear the story from the beginning, to understand it to the end. He literally became a different person, Catherine continued, and now her voice sounded smoother and much calmer. He was cruel, evil. Said I belonged to him. Said he'd show me what happened if something didn't please him. I've always thought that women who are victims of what's the word for domestic violence? It's often their own fault because they don't leave, because they don't decide to break it off the first time. And then it turns out I'm one of them, because then when it was over. 2 days later, Archie apologized so much. He said he was just scared he was going to lose me, so he snapped. He said he was so guilty that he felt unworthy of me. He literally flooded our house with flowers. He gave me a pink diamond necklace. He carried me in his arms, telling me how precious I was. It was a second honeymoon. The only thing that scared me a little was that he kept saying that it couldn't happen again. At first I thought he was talking about something he had done himself, but then I realized he was talking about my behavior, and I gave him an excuse again. It so happened that a boy, a young man, even younger than you, who came to clean the pool, fell and hurt his leg. I ran to get the first aid kit. The boy was in a lot of pain. I took him into the house, and he said he really needed this job to support his family. He was raised by his grandparents. He was afraid he had a fracture. Maybe I was too close to him. Should I not have touched him? But Archie, he called a doctor. Paid for his visit. The guy left. He even paid him for the unfinished pool cleaning. And then he was different again, and now it didn't end so quickly and easily. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't have survived then. But a man came into the house. He had the keys to our house. He had the keys to our house. This stranger literally pulled Archie away from me. Archie was screaming like a wild animal. I passed out before I realized what was happening. I woke up in a hospital, a private clinic. The police came to see me. They were asking questions. I was ready to tell everything, to say everything. I wanted to end it all. I was disgusted with myself as a victim. But two men entered the room. One introduced himself as my husband's lawyer. Oh, he really needed a lawyer at that moment. And the other was Dr. Charles Gray. He said he was my husband's psychiatrist and that the police had gotten it all wrong. That's when I found out that Archie had dissociative identity disorder. I'd heard of it, of course. I'd even seen it in a movie. But I had no idea it could look like this in real life. Like this, scary. It's different. It's like something else is being possessed. Turns out my husband has been sick for a long time. He's been diagnosed with it since he was 16. He's been treated. Dr. Charles' private clinic. After Charles' private clinic. Absolute confidentiality. There was an improvement and my husband was back to living life to the fullest. He was running a business. Everything was fine. Everyone thought so. I thought so. Dr. Charles and the lawyer explained to the police that there could be no liability for Archie for what he'd done to me, because he was sick and not responsible for his actions. I didn't believe it at first. I thought it was just an evil joke. I mean, maybe a lawyer's trick. But then I realized it was serious. The doctor explained that this disorder can take the most bizarre forms. In my husband's case, he had long been, how shall I put it, healthy. And then he got jealous and snapped. The doctor also suggested that he might have stopped taking some of his medications. I went back to the house and lived alone. For 6 months, I thought about us a lot. I wanted to file for divorce. Our prenup said I would get nothing and I didn't care. And then I realized I was pregnant. I couldn't get rid of the baby. Even though the father was a madman, Dr. Charles congratulated me and told me that I could not fear for the child's mental health. He said that the nature of this disorder is poorly understood, but that it is unlikely to be hereditary. He said that Archie really loves me, that he would be back from the clinic soon, and we could live together again. And he also told me why Archie was like that. And that's why. I guess that's why I decided to stay. Catherine gestured to the waitress to bring them more coffee, and then continued her story. Archie's father was a famous rich man, an oligarch in the British manor. He married the beautiful Selena from the USA. She was a model. Archie's mom died when he was 8. That day. The whole press wrote about it, it turns out. They quarreled at a reception, at a picnic where there were families of rich businessmen. She decided to take her son and go home with him. She gave up her chauffeur and drove herself. But she lost control of the car. They said she was on the phone, distracted by her son while she was driving. She died at the scene. Archie survived. His father never remarried. He also took over his son's upbringing, all by himself. He believed that. If it hadn't been for the boy's whims, and that night he was the one who'd asked his mother to go home, she'd still be alive. And he told Archie all that. Can you imagine blaming a child for his own mother's death? That must have been the first step to insanity. But then Archie's father was a hunter. Not the kind of hunter who'd come in, drive an animal out, and take a single meat shot. No, he was the kind of man who knew and loved to hunt. He could go into the jungle for a month and wander around for a month with only a couple of companions to get some special animal. So he started taking Archie with him. You know, when I heard all this, I couldn't understand how people around me, everyone who knew about it, allowed this to happen. It's not normal. Dragging a child all over the world, forbidding him to socialize with his peers and instead teaching him to track and kill animals. Deer, lions, snow leopards, crocodiles, dingoes, the list of trophies. It's nightmarishly long. Father was determined to make Archie, as he said, a real man. Brave, ruthless. I don't know how far. How far he went in his upbringing. Journalists called his father the Red Executioner for what he did. They said he paid bribes to hunt in the reserves. I felt sorry for Archie, growing up in those conditions. And then, when Archie was 16, his father died. Heart attack. He was heir to a multi-million-dollar fortune. Dr. Charles said that's when he had his first attack, a change of personality. Anyway, Archie's father's business partners, who were also hunting enthusiasts, wanted to go on safari. And they invited Archie along. And the night before the safari, they all got into a fight about something. And Archie, he attacked one of them. What a media frenzy. It was only thanks to Dr. Charles that Archie didn't lose his business. The doctor took partial custody of him. Can I ask you a question? Oliver asked as Catherine reached for a glass of water. If he went crazy like that and more than once, how did he even remain legally capable? How was he allowed to continue running his business? It was arranged that way, Catherine grinned bitterly. You see, sometimes there in England and America this happens. A person can do business, make money, sometimes very big, but his whole life is managed by his guardians. I read that it happened even to some stars, either from Hollywood or famous singers. I don't understand it either, but maybe it's because Archie, the girl, snapped her fingers. There are 2 states, and in one he's the best man in the world, the one I fell in love with. When I found out, I just couldn't leave him, take my daughter away from him. I decided that I would stay with him, that we'd get through this together, and we'd get through it. I believed that love could heal and save everything. Like in fairy tales. I was a fool. You're not a fool, Oliver said, reaching forward and touching her hand gently. You may have been wrong about something, as you said yourself. I'm not judging. Everything. It's so complicated. You are an amazing woman, finished the young man, embarrassed. And what happened next? How what? Did you end up here? After Archie came back from the clinic, we started living like a normal family. Everything was fine. My daughter was born. There were a few things that happened that I was afraid would happen again, but everything was fine. And then, anyway, we decided that our daughter, Marianne, would spend some time in a private boarding house. And I asked Archie if we could go to my homeland for a while. We came here. I missed my family. I wanted to visit them. You know, the realtor told us the house has a great alarm system. That's what I thought. I figured it was good enough for us. And you know, Catherine closed her eyes for a moment. Only now I become really scared. When I realize that Archie, he changed his personality. He's become the crazy one. Suddenly, nothing seemed to be pushing him. But she snapped her fingers again, switched, ordered another more advanced alarm system, then changed the code on the safe. He must have done all this while I was away visiting my family for a while. And when I came back, I didn't notice a thing. He seemed, does he, when he's in this split personality, does he remember what he's doing? Oliver asked. Dr. Charles says that his, shall we say, alternate personality is perfectly aware of everything that's going on in Archie's life. But he, when he's not sick, may not remember what the other, Doc Archie, is doing. The doctor says it's a kind of defense, because his evil half doesn't want to be known much, of course, to be tried to control in any way. And what's particularly frightening, that this other one, the other Archie, realizes that they're sharing this body. And he once said that one day there will only be one of them left. And it'll be him, the man his father would call worthy to be his heir. You know, Catherine looked carefully into Oliver's eyes. Sometimes I think that I didn't just make a mistake and married the wrong man. Sometimes I think I sold my soul to a demon, and now I belong to him. It's not like that. Oliver stopped her with heat. Of course you can change everything. There's a divorce. He stopped talking. I'm sorry, it's probably none of my business. You could have done it already if you wanted to. That's exactly what I want now, Catherine said. This time, if I'd stayed in the house, I'm afraid Archie might have gone too far. But we have a child together, and I can't judge Archie's actions pure and simple. I mean, he's just sick. And when he realizes what's happening to him, he suffers so much. I can't just leave him. Divorce, maybe, if I realize that he's ready and willing to let me go. I'm going back to England. I think I'll move closer to the clinic. And I can visit him every day. I still love him. Oliver didn't know what to say. He did not understand this woman so beautiful, who seemed to be such a radiant, luxurious lady who was living her sweet life and who had turned out to be a victim, essentially the plaything of a mad millionaire. And at the same time, Oliver could not help but draw parallels with his own life. After all, he loved his mother. Despite the fact that she had brought home drunken, angry men, despite the fact that she was now falling in her addiction, which threatened to make her lose her human, normal appearance. And that, too, was a kind of madness. But Oliver wasn't ready to leave his mom, even if he could. And he couldn't because his little sister was depending on him now. He didn't know how dare he ask for such a thing, but he risked it. He said that he realized that he wanted too much, but asked for permission to leave Catherine his email address so that she could let him know how she and her daughter were doing. After a few weeks, they met at the airport to say goodbye before her flight to London. Catherine handed the guy an envelope, and when Oliver opened it, he was shocked again, because there was a very decent amount of cash. Don't take offense and don't hurt me by refusing, Catherine said. You need to get your sister back on her feet, and here's more. She handed him a second envelope with some papers in it. Here's something else for you. I've hired you a good lawyer. It's just a client service package for a client at a good firm. They can help you if you have any problems, and they can help you if you have any problems, and they can help you get your mother into treatment for her addiction. It's up to you what you do with the money, but with what's going on in your house, better keep it in the bank. That's what I thought I'd do, Oliver nodded. I mean, it's not that I want to take them. It's too much. After everything, you know what would be the best thing for you to do. Her palms came down on his shoulders. Just live happily ever after. Let everything go well for you from here on out. I don't need anything more. And then Catherine was suddenly very close and her lips pressed against Oliver's cheek. The guy froze, barely comprehending what was happening as a reality, not part of a shameful, pre-dawn dream. A light imprint of lipstick and a trace of honey, spicy perfume was left on him. Soon Catherine disappeared among those who were called to board the flight, and then Oliver could watch the plane taking her to England, soaring into the sky and disappearing into the clouds. Once upon a time, now it seemed like an eternity ago, Oliver had thought that money could solve any problem in life, that it was the most important tool for making life good, for making a man happy. He was both amused and angry at the same time by statements in the style of, happiness is not in money. He reasoned that it is easy to say that when you are fed and your relatives do not need anything. And what do you say? What is happiness? If the little sister with greed, like a wolf cub, pounces on a sausage, in which there is no meat that only soy, if she is freezing in the wind in her thin jacket, which has already become small, so that the hands above the wrists almost blew from the cold. And now, by a bizarre and cruel twist of fate, Oliver had money in his hands. huge by the standards of his previous life. Of course, there was a kind of impulsive desire to please himself. Oliver saw that now you can eat everyday delicacies raw, smoked sausage, expensive dumplings. You can feed your sister with cakes. You can buy yourself clothes like a major and expensive watches, and also to make the apartment Euro repair. But at the same time, Oliver realized that these were desires that would have been natural for him before, and his recent past had changed him. And now he thought and planned his life differently. Of course, he began to spend money so that his sister ate well. He bought her new clothes and could not help but treat her with cakes from a very expensive pastry shop and bought her toys. But the main goals were still different. Oliver closed the debt on the utility bill and another debt in microloans. He did not understand how the mother, on whose face it was immediately clear that she was drinking everything. There was even money given, but the fact was that the loan had to be closed. Using the support of lawyers from Catherine, he found for his mother a good private clinic where they treated alcoholics. Naturally, the parent was against it. It was hard persuasion, monstrous scandals. But then, Oliver still managed to persuade her. Put her in front of the fact that just a little bit more and the little sister will go to the orphanage. With such a parent, he, by the way, had to deal with the guardianship because while the mother spent several months in the clinic, the little sister was in his care. And then, by the way, for the most part, Angela was brought up by him. But almost not the main concern and problem of the new life was that Oliver needed to protect his family from bad influences. First, he feared some kind of revenge from Sean, who went to jail for a long time, and only after about a year could calm down a little. Secondly, he realized that his mother's former drinking buddies, realizing that the family was better off, would try to break into their home again. It was not easy to dissuade all this pernicious company, but it was successful. Oliver often thought of Catherine. She did not forget him, and soon after the flight called him, told him that she had gotten there well and that her husband's treatment was going according to plan. But the prognosis was not particularly comforting. Oliver understood very well that the money left by this amazing woman is not infinite, and therefore seriously engaged in his own education, went to university. Deciding to engage in the future in what he had previously been good at, repairing cars, as well as transforming cars into something new by making all sorts of changes to them so that it turns out something quite original. Oliver had not been sociable in the old days, and now he was known among his family as a recluse. But for the first time in his life, he was so indifferent to what anyone said about him. Now the guy was only interested in what was going on in his life, his sister's life, and that was it. Sometimes he and Catherine called and talked, but then, about 6 years later, after the day that turned Oliver's life upside down, their communication came to naught, and the guy realized that in principle it was normal. After all, Catherine had done so much for him, even too much, and now his criminal record remained in the past. He got an education. In general, now he could live an independent, free life, and in fact, this breakup was the logical conclusion of the whole story. The last thing Oliver knew about Catherine was that she had divorced Archie and remarried to a good man, now a businessman from London. When Angela turned 16, Oliver decided that it was no longer possible to live with her mother. Yes, she was cured, but the character was worse than before. Deprived of her, as she said, medicine, she was always walking gloomy, nagging her children for nothing. She could start crying and lamenting that her son's whole life was ruined. It was as if she didn't notice that they were living better, that he was honestly working, and her daughter had grown up and was studying well. The decision to move to a rented apartment was largely made because Oliver wanted to protect his sister from his mother's influence. No, Angela didn't listen to her. She adored her brother. He was to her like a father and an older brother and best friend all at the same time. But it was impossible not to notice how the girl's gaze fades in the same apartment with her parents, how she tries not to talk about anything in her presence and generally lulls. Oliver often thought that his criminal past could and should be an insurmountable obstacle to work. And in part it was. More than once employers, having learned about his criminal record, refused to accept him. Then there was one man, Anthony, who said that the past. That's one thing, and what a man became afterward was another. This man owned a chain of auto repair shops. He hired Oliver at first for the most humble of jobs. And he was happy, like he was king. After a couple of years, Anthony made sure that his ward began a well-deserved career growth. When Angela graduated from high school, Oliver said that he would help her pay for university, wherever she decided to go. Her sister was careful to say that she wanted to go to a university in New York City. Oliver was a little shocked. After all, that meant moving, and to let Angela go alone. He realized that she was an adult, a young girl, and could live on her own. But he was very attached to her, and he was even more afraid that something bad might happen to his sweet, gentle little sister without his supervision. So Oliver went to Anthony and asked if there was any way he could arrange a change of workplace. He knew that the chief and in town on Neva has a machine shop, and not one, but as many as 4. Anthony thought about it and said yes. "You're a smart guy," he told Oliver. "It could easily be arranged. Didn't you think it was time to start your own business?" Actually, Oliver had thought about it, but he thought that there was still a lot to learn, and besides, he didn't want to waste his savings. He told Anthony honestly about it. "Well, an unhurried, reasonable approach is already half of success," smiled the boss. "When you're ready, let me know. We'll figure something out together. I'll help. I'll give you tips, help you find a good place. Organize the supply of spare parts, our smart staff in general. Contact me." Oliver was shocked. For the second time in his life, he met such a good person, ready to help, to support. Of course, Catherine and Anthony were completely different situations, and at the same time, Oliver realized that he needed to think it over, and in principle it would be unreasonable to refuse the outstretched helping hand. It was hard to leave his mother, but it was impossible to stay with her as a babysitter, especially since she had not had any breakdowns over the years, but her character had deteriorated. But Oliver decided that he had fulfilled his duty as a son. He helped her to say goodbye to alcohol, helped with the upbringing of the younger child. He would transfer money to his mother for groceries and everything else. And so, he had the right to move to another city with his sister and there. Just live on. Angela didn't think long about what she would become in the future. She had made her choice a long time ago, and Oliver even remembered the exact day. It was the day when he had brought home a lot of groceries for the first time since the incident at the mansion. There was a lot of stuff in there, but his little sister had grabbed a loaf of bread with both hands. It was an unusual loaf, though. Oliver had bought it from a bakery in a big supermarket. It was baked with white wheat flour and cornmeal, and there were raisins and other dried fruits in it. The little girl took a bite of the crispy crust with airy crumb, closed her eyes in pleasure. "When I grow up, I'll bake bread," Angela said. Oliver didn't pay much attention to it at the time. And then, he talked to his sister about what she planned to study. She named different options. As it turned out, she was just thinking about each one. And in the end, she came back to her first decision. She decided to study food production technologist and then work at a huge bakery or in a small, cozy bakery or in a small, cozy bakery. As Angela herself said, time will show where she will find her place. The mother, by the way, never communicated with her daughter on this subject. Their family broke up. They were not close to the mother and her children. Existed, in fact, as a family, just the two now brother and sister, and the mother. They respected her, loved her. But the warmth and tender affection, the trust in their parent. Moving to New York turned out to be a troublesome affair, but in the end they settled very well, and even with the apartment, Oliver decided that it was possible to overpay a little for the fact that the sister had a 5-minute walk to the fact that the sister had a 5-minute walk to the subway, for the fact that the window overlooked the Neva, and for the fact that the housing was decent repair. Oliver got a job at Anthony's car service, and then when his sister was already in her 2nd year, he took a risk and opened his own business. And it turned out to be insanely difficult, especially since he decided not to get involved in stories with loans, debts, and rely only on his own funds. But slowly the case went, and in general it began to seem that life is getting better in all respects. The only thing that sometimes upset Oliver was his sister's behavior. No, Angela was a decent, and even by the standards of the surrounding modernity, homely and modest girl. But she often talked about the fact that his brother should get married, and that she too would one day have to find a groom. "I am to those suitors," Oliver said grimly, implying that anyone who tried to get Angela's attention would have to deal with him personally. "Come on, I haven't met anyone yet." She laughed. "But you're a lone wolf. You can't do that. Let me find you someone." "You can find mushrooms in the forest," Oliver liked to say. "I'm fine on my own for now. I got a lot to do." "What's love got to do with it? I have to take care of you. We should still buy an apartment later. Maybe a mortgage, if business goes well." We lived like that. On weekends we walked around the city together, went to the movies and museums, and sometimes they stayed at home and just watched TV, some movies. Angela especially liked thrillers, and Oliver watched them in company with his sister. But he had long ago realized that he had enough thrills in his life. The ones he'd experienced once. And then this happened. One day, Oliver picked Angela up at one of the city libraries. In general, visiting it was not obligatory for students, but Angela decided that since the final exams, the diploma, she needed to prepare for everything in the best possible way. And so she spent a long time in the reading rooms, where they studied ancient books about baking. She never tired of telling her brother that when she herself would work in this field, she wanted not just to follow some instructions and traditions, but also dreamed of bringing something new to baking, but at the same time based on what was accepted when this art flourished at the beginning of the last century. Oliver praised her enthusiasm and said that she was an amazing and unique girl, and that if all people were so serious and inspired about what they were doing, life would probably be a lot better. The library was closing any minute now. Oliver could see it in his watch. He stood by the auto, and then 2 female figures descended the steps of the book depository. In one he recognized his sister at once, but the other was not familiar to him. "This is Angelica," Angela introduced her friend. "Can we give her a ride home?" "Nice to meet you, Oliver," he said. "That's all right. Where are we going?" As they drove to one of the high-rises in the center of the city, they got to talking. It turned out that Angelica and Angela had been friends for a long time, but rarely went out together. Both of them were about to graduate from universities, but Angelica was studying to be a veterinarian, and then was going to continue her studies abroad in England, where her family lived. In the evening, at dinner, Angela cast strange glances at her brother. "What?" Oliver couldn't stand it. "How do you like her?" "Who?" "Angelica." "What do you mean?" "She seems fine." "Do you like her? I mean as a woman?" "Angela." Oliver rose abruptly from the table. The formal excuse was to take the dirty dishes to the sink, but in reality he felt impossibly stupid because he really liked Angelica. He'd never done anything stupid before, and here he was. "I told her a lot about you." "Why?" "Because you're a good and lonely man. I told her how smart, strong, kind you are. And she, she's lonely too. She recently broke up with her boyfriend. He lives in London and couldn't wait for her to finish her studies. I'm not interested in any of that." "Who are you lying to, Oliver?" He didn't answer as he stubbornly rubbed a sponge with the remedy on his plate. It was very strange. But suddenly his sister's words seemed reasonable to Oliver. Indeed, wasn't he entitled to a normal, healthy relationship with the opposite sex? But this Angelica, she's more than a year younger than he is. However, the difference is not so great. But she, She's going abroad soon. I wouldn't want to be like that boyfriend from London, who didn't want to be like that boyfriend from London. Although, thinking theoretically, Oliver had no doubt that if he had a woman he loved, no distance would be an obstacle to love. Why did he even think about it? No, he was totally against it. And yet, he didn't understand how it happened. But on the weekend, Angela dragged him along, and in Angelica's company, they all visited an exhibition together, then went bowling and ate pizzas. Angelica was a very positive, open-minded person. She could be like a chirping bird, or she could be silent. She had a big dream of treating wild animals, especially those that had suffered at the hands of man. The only thing that confused her and drove her into a kind of closed state was talking about the past. She only said that she had no father. She only had a mom. I mean, father is kind of there, but he's not there either. Well, it's complicated. And they've all seen very little of each other in the last few years. Oliver didn't pry into his soul. He understood too well that a man could have his own family problems. He didn't notice how soon Angelica occupied all his thoughts, and the decision to send her a bouquet of flowers with candy enclosed between them to the address of the apartment, which gave him Angela, was given unexpectedly easy. True, there was how awkward from the fact that in the details of their relationship was devoted to his sister, but with this, had to just put up with it. In principle, the romance was not developing rapidly. Angelica was very busy preparing for graduation. And then, when this magnificent event happened, first with her and then with Angela, Oliver suddenly found himself facing a difficult choice. The thing was that Angelica was going to England, and so was Angela. His sister suddenly said that London was beautiful in the summer, and he, Oliver, should arrange a vacation at work and fly there with her and her friend. "We vacationed in Turkey last year," Oliver said. "We went to Greece for your birthday." "Well, brother," Angela, in this conversation, fortunately private, made the most pitiful and begging eyes that she could. "We can afford it. We can, theoretically. But what are you going to do there? If memory serves me correctly, you like to lounge on the beach like a seal. Are you saying that I'm fat?" Angela faked, shocked, aghast. "Just as lazy and pretty." He jokingly tapped her nose with his finger. Well, if you want so much, then let's go to London. But it's hard to get a visa there. Everything will be fine. I have a feeling." "Thank you, Oliver. You're the best." Angela threw herself around her brother's neck. Contrary to the darkest expectations, because Oliver thought that his criminal record could ruin everything, he got the visa. Then there were troubles with the collection of things. It was still necessary to plan what to do in London. Oliver assumed that most of them there with his sister would be left to themselves, because Angelica wanted first of all to see their relatives. And Oliver was also very worried about the prospect that one day, or rather in the near future, he would have to talk to Angelica about what was going on between them. They had not yet gone so far in their relationship that they could not remain just friends. But it was already quite clear that the girl intended to stay in England to continue her studies, and accordingly, it was necessary to really decide something. To part already in a certain status, friends or lovers. And this choice seemed excruciatingly difficult. And then it turned out that it was possible to adapt to this city, to London in a couple of days, no worse than to some resort on a tropical coast. And Oliver even sincerely began to agree with his sister that it was a good idea to come here. And then Angelica unexpectedly invited them to a reception. "A reception for the Queen?" Oliver joked. "No, brother." Angela elbowed him affectionately in the side. "It's just kind of a party, where her parents will be and all that." "Oh, there'll be tons of people there. You can bring your friends, and she's inviting you and me." "I don't know," Oliver sighed. "I'm not really cut out for the high society stuff. Business. A few creative people. Someone else." "Well, can't we just show up there for 5 minutes?" just as a courtesy. Let me guess. Oliver was already realizing he'd go anywhere with his sister. You're gonna need a new dress for 5 minutes. Don't you have anything in your closet that fits? The right one is in New York in my closet. And here, yes, I need a new dress. I bet that's all you're going for. There was a reason to dress up, Oliver replied, thinking that he would have been much happier to spend the evening in his hotel room, just sitting in front of a real fireplace in a chair with a book in his hand. From what Angelica had told him, the reception was to be held in an art gallery, small and not overly formal. In general, Oliver was not a fan of modern art and had already foreseen that this gallery would be full of nonsense with a high meaning, at the sight of which one might want to laugh indecently. That was the maximum, but certainly not to discuss the great message of the creators who had creators who had creators who had created it. Still, Oliver decided that for half an hour or so, he would be able to portray the most decent, educated, and well-mannered person. It was comforting to know that Angelica herself didn't seem to be a big fan of such modern thing. Oliver honestly couldn't imagine himself paired with a man who didn't share his tastes. He realized that, in theory, tastes could differ, but he still thought that for true love, one had to have a maximum of common ground in one's interests. We're going to get lost here, he said when they arrived at the place and showed the invitations to a couple of serious men at the entrance to the gallery, who were definitely guards large and suspicious, as if the robbery of the century was being prepared here. She said she'd just sent a text saying she'd meet. Aha! There she was. Angela waved her hand at the girl, and Oliver was struck to the heart, because how beautiful Angelica was in that scarlet silk little dress. The girl's blonde hair descended in a silk wave on one shoulder, long earrings made of sparkling crystals were swinging in her small ear. They exchanged phrases as if about nothing. Angelica promised that now she would show them everything here. But first, I want you to meet my parents. Let's go, she said, and took Oliver under her arm and led him away. Angela whispered in his ear, whispering in his ear. Oliver didn't say anything, because his attention was fixed on the statuesque blonde in the silver dress. Her back was to him, but something about her seemed subtly familiar. And then she turned. Angelica chirped, introducing her mother Catherine to her friends. Oliver froze, because there she was, Catherine, and judging by the way her eyes widened and flashed, she recognized him too. "Hello," she said to him. It seemed to Oliver that it was like a meteoric shower was falling on his consciousness right now. This meeting, the realization that Catherine was the mother of the girl he had a crush on. It all took a few moments that seemed like an eternity. And then, in the next few moments, Oliver heard Angelica's voice introducing her father to him. Oliver met the blond man's eyes. He hadn't changed much, except that his hair was sloppier and there were deep shadows around his eyes. "And this is a close friend of my father's, Dr. Charles Gray," Angelica said. "At last the daughter is introducing us to her mysterious friends." Archie smiled and held out his hand to Oliver. "And we thought she'd made them up." Oliver knew that sometimes 1,000 words might not be enough to explain, and sometimes a glance was enough to make everything clear. And now he realized Archie recognized him. He remembered everything perfectly. The thought came to him that Catherine had said almost nothing over the years about Archie's attitude to that story, to the fact that his wife had helped one of the raiders in their house. Only once she had said that their relationship with Archie, and at that time, by the way, they were still married, was good enough and trusting enough for him to at least respect the decisions she made. But whatever Archie remembered and knew, he had. He had not shown it in any way. Or rather, he didn't say anything about it. He'd only asked Oliver some light questions about the exhibition, then complimented his sister. And then the man called Dr. Charles had led him away. Charles took him aside and said something in English that seemed to refer to today's exhibition. And as if that weren't enough, the man Angelica had introduced to her friends as her stepfather joined the little group next. He was a short, balding man with a broad and charming smile. And although Oliver did not know him at all, for some reason it seemed to him that this man was not just Catherine's husband, but also her good friend, that this man probably managed to make her happy. And she certainly, after all she had been through, deserved it. "Daughter, I'm going to steal your friend for a minute, okay?" Catherine said, pulling Oliver aside. "Okay, Mom," she answered a little absent-mindedly. "What's going on? Do they know each other?" She turned to Angela, who was standing next to her, and her stepfather. "I have no idea," she replied with the most nonchalant air. But in fact, Angela had already guessed something. It had been no secret to her for a long time that the events that had started the big changes in her and her brother's lives had taken place. Oliver had told her everything several times. When she was a baby, when she was a teenager, and when she was an adult. And each version, of course, had been slightly different, because he hadn't wanted to and couldn't bring it all down on his sister at once. But now she knew everything. And she quickly guessed who was in front of her when Angelica said the name of her father and his friend. These people were familiar to her from her brother's story, but, of course, Angelica didn't show it. She was only a little confused, for it seemed that Catherine's daughter's name was Marianne, and Angelica's. Meaning, while Catherine and Oliver came out onto the terrace surrounding the gallery, the air smelled sweetly, thickly of roses. "I didn't think so." "I didn't think so either. So you like my daughter?" "I don't. I don't want you to think." Oliver ran a hand through his hair in a nervous gesture, ruffling it. "I didn't assume. I thought I would never what?" "No, I don't mind," she shrugged. "It's just so. We haven't spoken in a while," he said, without a shadow of reproach, but somehow it sounded like that. "I just thought that at some point it would be better for you to let some of the past go, to make room for something new. You could have asked me. Would you have said yes?" "No, of course not." Oliver took a few deep breaths, calming down. She changed her name. She didn't want to be recognized. Her father's last name is quite rare. "You must be terribly disappointed." "What? That my daughter, out of millions of men, for some reason decided to have an affair with you?" "Have an affair? What? We're not having an affair? You think I didn't realize the way she looks at you, and you look at her?" "Well, May, I just haven't." "You haven't talked to her about it, have you?" "Talk to her." She's confused. She's hesitant to go first. Maybe, but she must have gotten this romanticism from me and is waiting for a man to come along, to open up first. I mean, really open up. He'll tell me he loves me. As a mother, I say yes. Why don't you say anything? I never imagined it would turn out this way. It really was a shock to him. But his desire to be together with the girl was not diminished by the fact that he found out who her parents were. Would her father mind? "You know, I wouldn't want..." Her stepfather, as you probably already know, isn't on good terms with her. It's too late to raise her. He'd never do it. And as for Archie, no, they haven't had father-daughter intimacy for a long time. He doesn't belong to us anymore." "Oh, is that so?" "Yes." For the first time, Catherine's tone changed, as if the shell had cracked and the bitter pain masked by her outward lightness had been revealed. "You know, sometimes I think that Dr. Charles initially knew and expected that his patient never recovered. He now has full custody of Archie. He still technically owns his company, but in essence, it's now run by lawyers, managers that Charles hired. I feel like Archie's lost. Even if I continue to really love him, I think sometimes that Charles knows how to run him, and that he has long ago resolved to do everything he can to get this patient into the right state of mind, in which he can always, if need be, easily prove that he needs his care and treatment. That's it. I'm talking conspiracy theories for an individual family, aren't I? She grinned, looking out into the darkness of the garden. I don't have any proof. And you know what's worse? I think there's more of that dark side of Archie now, even when he seems healthy. I mean, he doesn't love me or his daughter anymore. I think he's forgotten what that is. He's just accepted that he's sick. He's too accepting of the fact that he can turn into a monster. And even when he wasn't, he forbade himself from loving us. Our decision to break up was mutual. He doesn't want to hurt me ever again. Except, he doesn't want to realize that there's a man next to him who benefits, so that he'll always. For the rest of his life, he's at risk of snapping. Oliver nodded. Many things made more sense to him now. For example, Angelica's desire to become a veterinarian. Was it possible that this desire was driven by a desire to atone for the cruelty of her grandfather and father, and father, and father, and father, to clear her name of their cursed, insane legacy? Have you ever thought, he asked, that Archie, that he's like this on his own, that he's really in trouble? I'm probably touching on something that doesn't concern me at all right now, but maybe you just still haven't let him go? I don't know, Catherine replied, and his voice trembled. Maybe I'm just hurt that I lost my husband. So I'm making up explanations. You're right, it would be good for me to let go of the past already. Maybe Charles was really only trying to help him all these years. Say, are you? Now Catherine was looking at him carefully. What do you want? It was a very simple yet infinitely complex question. Oliver realized the answer to it was meant for one person, and for different people at the same time, for the mother of the girl he was in love with, and for Catherine, whose support had once turned his fortunes around. And he answered honestly. And in those same moments, he suddenly realized definitively for himself what he needed: to marry. I love her. Catherine was silent for a while. You know, I thought that the example of his own family in general will turn her away from relationships, or that she will decide to them, but will meet an unsuitable, difficult man. And she met you. And you know what else is interesting? Oliver listened to her without interrupting. When I was imagining the kind of man I'd want for my daughter, I somehow never thought of you. But now it seems to me that it's not the worst option. She smiled at him. Shall we go back? We must be lost by now. And how did you like the exhibition, by the way? Just nightmarish, Oliver replied. After about an hour, Oliver and Angela left the event and went back to their hotel. Oliver was completely unprepared to talk to Angelica. He didn't know what to say to his sister, and she just flooded him with questions about what he was going to do now. I don't know. Maybe I should just talk to her and tell her everything. Now, Angela's eyes widened. When else? When else? Maybe you need to get to know each other better first. I don't know. The sister waved her hands. Maybe first. I think now is the time. Oliver said firmly. Can you imagine what it would look like if I dragged this out? That I was trying to make her fall in love with me so hard that she'd agree to everything? No, I just found out about it, and I can't wait any longer. Now. Well, not right now, Oliver sighed. It's nighttime, but I'll talk to her tomorrow. Planning was much easier than actually doing it. Oliver was nervous. Angelica, on the other hand, didn't seem to suspect anything. She agreed and suggested that they meet at a small cafe where they could have a cozy chat over a cup of coffee. Oliver grinned nervously as he put the phone down. That was what she'd said. Cozy, although personally he thought the atmosphere of a living room with a fireplace in a Gothic castle would be more appropriate for such a conversation. This was crazy. Mentally giving himself a light slap in the face, the man pulled himself together. Angela said that she was going to visit a museum dedicated to bread. In general, the sister carefully pretended that she had nothing to do with it, that everything was normal. There's something I need to tell you, Oliver said as they sat down at the table. He was mentally prepared for the possibility that at any moment Angelica would interrupt him and not want to hear anything more about it. But she listened for some reason. He talked. He told her everything from the beginning about what his youth had been like and how he had made a big mistake, about what happened afterwards. He didn't hold anything back or sugarcoat his own role in what had happened. He didn't want pity. He didn't want understanding. The only thing that mattered to Oliver was that Angelica now knew the truth. His narrative ended at the moment he'd first seen her leaving the library with his sister. Mom told me a little bit about what happened, but he just said that Dad had a breakdown on that trip. She didn't say exactly how it happened, and Oliver nodded. That's it. Not only had he revealed the truth about her parents' past, but he'd also revealed to her the truth about the events in her parents' past that she'd been trying to stay away from. What was she supposed to do now? Only the stamina he'd acquired over the years allowed Oliver to stay put rather than run away. He understood that it had to end now, and he must face it courageously, as bravely as he could. Thank you for telling me everything, Angelique said. And thank you. What? Oliver choked on the words because the continuation about how grateful he was to her for the time they'd spent together suddenly seemed so trite and stupid. But there was something else you wanted to tell me. Angelica suddenly reached for him. Her thin, hot fingers covered his cool hand and squeezed it slightly. I thought, you wanted to talk to me about something before we arrived for the evening? Yes, I did, he nodded. I wanted to tell you that I love you and that I want us to get married. I know I understand you're going to stay here to study, and then your going will probably require constant traveling, but none of that matters. I'm ready for everything. But Their eyes met. But I want you to stay, she replied. And the past, it doesn't matter to me. I want to create a new future with you. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.